Welcome to another edition of Papa's Perspective. I'm Bob Papa. As the Giants celebrate 100 seasons of Giants football, Papa's Perspective is brought to you by Bob's Discount Furniture, the official furniture store and a mattress partner of the New York Giants. So on this segment, as we continue our 100 season celebration, we have with us as a very special guest, Bob Robustelli, whose dad, Andy, is one of the all-time great players in not only Giants history, but NFL history. And Bob has a new book out, and it's called The Pope of the NFL. Bob, thank you so much for joining us. And what inspired you to write this book about your dad?
I think after he passed, I think it became a situation of a little bit of closure. Started to do a lot of research. Wasn't sure where it would go or where it would take us. But in the end, as we started moving along with it and writing and rewriting and editing, we got it to a pretty good point where we thought it was a very good idea to publish. So I worked with Peter Golenbeck, who's a well-known sports writer in the area, and it's a legacy to a great man, and I think a very, very humble and family-oriented man.
Yeah, I mean, the family's a big part of the whole thing, right? And what your dad meant to the entire family and the part of the Giants family. It's funny we use that word family, but was there anything in the book that you uncovered, some stories that maybe you didn't even know about?
Yeah, there were certain aspects of it. One of them was his war years. Um, he never spoke about the war. He was on the USS William C. Cole in the Pacific Theater. He was a gunner, and they were a destroyer escort vessel. And Guadalcanal, Okinawa. So I learned a lot about that through research. The other things that I learned basically were the way that the people that he interacted with him. He did everything based on, I think, one basic principle, and I think that basic principle was do the right thing. And that was not only with the Robustelli family, which is pretty huge, but with his Giant family and even his corporate service family. I mean, Robustelli Corporate Services, after his years of playing, there's girls and ladies and gentlemen who still to this day meet and have cocktails and reminisce about the family that we were. So I think it was a combination of a lot of different things, but the biggest thing I found was the war years. Very, very interesting.
Bob, when you think about your father, obviously he was in charge of football operations for the Giants. They didn't call it a GM at that point in time.
Right.
But some of the things that I noticed in the book was his post playing day passion for still being involved in the sport. Talk a little bit about that to our audience.
Well, I think that football naturally was in his blood. I mean, I remember being a little boy, and he'd come home after practice, and he'd sit in our den, and he'd just watch film. In those days, it was the click, the Super 8. It wasn't what they have now. So I think his passion for it remained. He did have a stint with NBC as a commentator for 1 year. Didn't think he was doing a good job, so he quit. They walked in and said, "Look, I just can't do a good job on this, so I'm leaving." So, it's only the one time that I remember him ever really failing at anything. He then hooked up with Jackie Robinson for the Brooklyn Dodgers, a semi-pro league, for a couple of years. And then I think in 1973, when the Giants were kind of in that 50-50 ownership situation, they asked him to come in and try to work things out. And just because he knew it was the right thing to do, that's what he did.
When you think about his playing days, and the fact that he comes to the Giants, they start winning championships, the legacy. My mom could still recite the Giants starting defense. They made defense sexy. The chant of defense. It was your dad's group that kind of created liking defense to be cool.
No question about it. I mean, in those days, they always introduced the offense first before the game. At Yankee Stadium, they started doing the defense. Those days of the Giants, I think, were the best thing that could have ever happened to my father. I think when he got traded from the Rams to the Giants because of a family matter, he just, I think, blossomed into who he was. Being home, being in Connecticut. I remember when we were in LA, I was very young, but we'd go out there for 5-6 months and then come back. His base was always Stamford, Connecticut, where he grew up. So in that time, he was able to interact with a lot of different things and a lot of different people. And the Giant years were the best. And I think there he also met one of the men that he most respected in Wellington.
You know, your father was interesting because he built this unbelievable business, you know, and how much of what he was as a football player, as far as his attention to detail, his discipline, his determination, how did that carry over into the family business?
Well, I think it was a major part. I mean, when they talk about the 4-3 defense from the Giants' perspective and Tom Landry, I mean, Tom Landry, he invented it. There's no question about it. I think my father had a pretty good part in refining it with him. All of that structure for him and the organization that he found, I think, within the Giants at that time helped him in his business. He was motivated in business from the time he was 10 years old. I mean, he was selling, little ink mix, little metal parts to the shop down the street to raise $4 or $5. In college, he sold ties and sporting goods. So he was always acclimated to that. I think the biggest thing that he did and what made him so successful, number one, was discipline. There's no question. But he was organized more so than any man I've ever known. He'd have organizational charts and he'd change them all the time. He'd constantly be working on them. So his passion for business and his passion for taking care of that business as a family, I think, is what made him the man he was.
In the book, what are some of the football related stories that the audience is going to enjoy reading about?
I think part of the training camp issues when they were in Fairfield County and how we all hung out as the kids with the players. I think the games and what went on before the games, like on Saturday, they used to have a run through. All of us kids would get together, the Giffords, the Rotes, and we'd be out in Roger Maris land in right field there playing touch football while they were practicing. So it's a lot of family, friend, fun stuff that I think they'd enjoy. There's a lot more in there than just football, but there's a lot of football too.
How cool is that? You think about those Yankee teams and those Giants teams, and the Giants winning a championship the first year in Yankee Stadium. Yankees won the World Series that year. Giants are perennially in these championship games. Yankees are winning most of them. Giants, unfortunately, are not winning most of them. But it must have been a really cool experience for the players and the families to cross-pollinate with the Yankees in that early part of the season.
No question about it. And the one thing that my father always was amazed at was that Joe D's locker was right next to my father's locker. Never forgot it. I mean, to him, as well known as he was, he still knew Joe D was the man. And all of the interaction between the players themselves and that time in New York, it was just a special time. I mean, Yankee Stadium was the Mecca. There's no question. I mean, that's where it all happened.
Where does the term the Pope come from?
Well, the Pope term comes from, the story goes that they were all out one night at an away game, and I guess some of the guys were drinking and some of the guys were, doing whatever. And my father basically went up to them and said, "Hey guys, we got a game tomorrow. Let's all get out of here and go home and do what we're supposed to do." And at that point, Dick Lynch knelt down, kissed his ring, and called him the Pope. That's the story.
Why does that not surprise me that it was my former broadcast colleague, Dick Lynch, that would be the wise guy to come up with that?
And Dick Lynch would, when the guys used to come over the house, it would be Dick Lynch, it would be Roosevelt Brown, it would be Eric Barnes, Jack Stroud. When Dick Lynch came over, he always brought ice cream. So Dick Lynch in our house was known as the ice cream man.
That I could see too. And I could see him. I bet you brought a lot of it.
He did. But then, he was a great guy. They were all just great guys. Cat and Mo and, Sam Huff. They were great, great people.
And all part of the 100 greatest players in the history of the franchise, including your father, who was one of the great players in the history of in the NFL. So where can people buy the book? Right
now, the book is up on Amazon Books. It's there. We're looking for further distribution. We have some meetings with people that we're going to. We're going to book shows and doing a lot of promotions around here, hopefully in New York. We're looking at getting, it's on Goodreads. So, it's starting to get out there.
Well, it's good. It's the perfect gift for someone with the holiday season coming up, especially if they're a Giant fan.
Right, it really is. And again, it's such a cross section of faith, family, business, football. I mean, it's pretty good, I think.
Bob, we appreciate a couple of minutes. Thank you so much as we continue the 100 season celebration of the New York Giants to be a part of the Papa's Perspective podcast.
Bob, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on. I really do. Thank you.
That's Bob Robustelli joining us here on this edition of Papa's Perspective, brought to you by Bob's, the official furniture store and a mattress partner of the New York Giants.